Frost-free away from some sheltered parts of the far southeast. And we keep largely cloudy skies into the afternoon, although some glimmers of brightness will lead to some remarkably mild air across Wales and northern England. Increasingly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Similar conditions on Monday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with GB News. Good evening from the newsroom. The headlines just after 11 o'clock. The Conservative Party chairman has suggested there could be more tax-cutting announcements to come before a general election in the autumn. It follows this month's reduction in national insurance contributions. Richard Holden told GB News earlier the 2% cut was just the beginning of a series of possible tax cuts.
We're coming out of that very tough period and we're able to outline our plans for the future. I think the actual tax cut you mentioned, the national insurance cut for working people, is the start of that. We'll see more of that in March and more of it later in the year as well. But we have that new direction of travel which is clear.
Elsewhere, Houthi rebels have stepped up their attacks on ships in the Red Sea tonight, including a missile strike on a British oil tanker. Maritime security officials say there is a fire on board that vessel. but the crew on the ship are safe. It follows reports this morning of another missile strike and explosions near a separate oil tanker in the Red Sea. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has warned this week of more strikes against the rebels if attacks on commercial ships don't come to an end. In the US, Donald Trump has tonight been ordered to pay more than $83 million, that's around £65 million, in damages to former female journalist E. Jean Carroll. Pictures here of Carroll leaving court in just the last hour or so after the jury reached that verdict, taking less than 3 hours to deliberate. It's the conclusion of a defamation case that she brought against Trump, accusing him of destroying her reputation as a trusted journalist by denying that he raped her nearly 3 decades ago. Well, in response to that ruling, Trump has taken to his own social media platform, Truth Social, saying that he fully disagrees with those verdicts. He says he will be appealing them, and he's called it a Biden-directed witch hunt. In sport, Jurgen Klopp has today promised he will never manage another English club after announcing he's stepping down as Liverpool's manager at the end of this season. Liverpool was transformed under his leadership, winning 6 trophies, including the Premier League in 2020 and the Champions League a year before. Speaking to the media this afternoon, he said there'll be plenty of time for a transition.
With all the responsibility you have in this job and these kind of things, you have to be absolutely top of your own game. That's how it is, and I am. But I'm doing this for 24 years now. I realized that my resources are not endless.
Baroness Michelle Mone and her husband have had their assets frozen today following an application by the Crown Prosecution Service. The Financial Times is reporting that it amounts to around £75 million. It comes as the couple are being investigated for their involvement in supplying PPE during the pandemic. She has previously admitted that she lied when denying connections to MedPro, which made profits of £60 million during the pandemic. The Crown Prosecution Service has said today that harmful myths about rape and consent continue to impact survivors and justice. In the largest survey of its kind in 5 years, it found that 1 in 12 people believe being in a relationship means there's automatic consent to sex. It also revealed that more than half of 18 to 24-year-olds were unsure if it's still a rape if a victim doesn't resist or fight back. The CPS has said it will use the findings to update its training and guidance for prosecutors, aiming to stop false beliefs. And finally, new figures have revealed that there is a clear geographical divide in life expectancy across the country. The south of England has the highest life expectancy, while the north lags behind. The Office for National Statistics data shows a gap of over a decade for men and more than 7 years for women. Hampshire tops the list for men at 83.7 years, while Blackpool has the lowest at 73.4 years. Campaigners say they're calling for more targeted interventions from the government to help bridge that gap. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom for now. For more, we're on TV, on digital radio, and of course on your smart speaker too. Now, though, it's time for Headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's top stories. I'm your host, Simon Evans. Joining me this evening we have comedians and BFFs, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. That's best friends forever, I think, rather than some sort of sexual... I don't know. I don't keep up with the acronyms, but I think you're on safe ground there. You all right?
Yeah, that's the first bit of misinformation you've put out tonight already.
I'm feeling good tonight, to be honest. I'm 58 years of age, and I have learned today I've got more staying power than Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah.
So that's all right, isn't it? He's a mere 56, and he's had enough.
He hasn't given up yet. He says he's going to give up.
He's never going to manage an England club again, so I can't imagine what you could do after that.
Can I just announce I'm leaving Headlines at the end of the season?
Yeah.
Not just now. I've run out of energy.
Whatever our COP equivalent is going to be running with tears, Nick.
Yeah.
But we'll talk you back into it. Anyway, let's have a look at those front pages. The Times kick us off tonight with a story we covered last night as well. The Nottingham mother calling for inquiry into killings. That is not her picture. That is Camilla there.
Telegraph, US to move nuclear weapons back to the United Kingdom. I've no idea who that pre-Raphaelite beauty is that is illustrating that story. The Guardian, Israel ordered by court to prevent genocide in Gaza. That's one way of describing their verdict. The Express, King chose Kate's Hospital to save taxpayers' money. And the iNews, UK's golden age with China harmed British intelligence, says former MI6 spy chief. The Daily Mail, Camilla's smile that says, the King's fine. And those were your front pages. So, Lewis, we're going to start with Saturday's Guardian. I don't actually have a copy of this. I'm going to have to trust you.
You've got to trust me. Israel ordered by court to prevent genocide in Gaza. And this is why Americans hate the world.
Yeah.
This is why I grew up having no trust for the world.
Because of international law.
It's not international law, because this is, first of all, what South Africa brought these charges. What does South Africa, that's called standing, right? They've got nothing involved, no stake in the game.
No.
And they brought it. But the ruling came back, and it came back and said that the International Court of Justice in The Hague basically said Israel can carry on. Even though they said no. They said, please don't commit genocide.
It's the thing about genocide, as it's discussed in a court, is it has to have a number of factors. It's not just an overwhelming case of state-sanctioned mass murder, which you could argue that this is or isn't. But that isn't the point, is it? Genocide has to have the intent to eliminate an entire people. And I don't think they found that was present, did they?
Well, how could they do that? Do you know something? You know, the population in the Gaza has almost doubled in just 15 years.
Yeah.
So you hardly can call that anyway.
Well, I think the point is, I'm not saying it has been, but what is contested is that the genocide began quite recently, not that it's been a sustained policy of genocide.
If the court, whether it has or it hasn't, the court has not said that it has.
No.
Because if the courts, if it's been genocide, the court would have said, stop this genocide. But the court didn't say that.
No. Nick, do you have a view on this? Well, the UN has obviously had a number of outstanding allegations against Israel for some time anyway, which it's just brushed off. So.
Yeah, well, similar to this in that South Africa can get lost. I mean, there's something more akin to a genocide going on against the white farms in South Africa, which is controversial, but that's, Elon Musk has
they've seen a song to that effect.
Yeah. I know, so they can shut up. So that annoys me. I do understand that Netanyahu has alienated a lot of people with his kind of bombastic rhetoric and obviously the war itself. But like Lewis says, what does it actually achieve, this ruling? It doesn't really, it just becomes virtue signaling, really, because it just says, oh, yeah, please don't do a genocide, which everyone would say. So it doesn't really achieve anything. What's the point?
I suppose eventually, arguably, if enough verdicts of this kind were to gradually accrue, then it might give some government or other the confidence it needs in order to withdraw its support to put sanctions. Yeah. I mean, but obviously America is the big deal, isn't it? Without America,
but with Trump, it'd be very different with Trump, wouldn't it? I mean, he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He has a very close ties with Jared Kushner. You sort of imagine with Trump, it'd be a lot more pro-Israel vibe in the world.
I mean, this is one issue on which I can't think he's going to be any more decisive. That Biden has been extraordinarily pro-Israel as well, wouldn't you say?
I don't think so. No, I think he hasn't been. He said some less supportive things. He's hinted at. Yeah, I don't think he has been. I think Trump would be far more.
Do you think he feels he'll lose votes over this in America? In November, yeah.
Yeah, there's way more. I think the people of America, generally speaking, support Israel. The truth is that this is I feel bad for the Palestinians. Is that they're basically screwed, and they have no support from Egypt. They've got no support from Saudi Arabia. They've got no support from Jordan. They're surrounded by people who don't like them. And then this court ruling, if this makes them happy to think, you know what.
Well, maybe that's something. The next paper we have, what do you got, Nick?
Yeah, well...
Telegraph.
Yeah, Telegraph, and we may as well just note that Rishi Sunak is one of the front page stories here. Number 10 attacks irony of Israel genocide ruling. And Sunak has come out pretty strong. He says anyone or any organisation that cannot unequivocally condemn the evil that Hamas did has no conscience, no morality, no decency, and deserves no respect. And he calls this a horrific irony of Israel being accused of genocide of all countries. And so he's sort of strongly standing behind Israel there. And
I don't think that's an irony that's lost on the people who make these allegations, is it? It's always sort of raised as if how can you possibly accuse? I mean, people sort of
that's why they're doing it.
And observe that. Yeah.
Well, do you know some things that
But let's not go back to that story. What else have they got on the television?
Yeah, so they've got US to move nuclear weapons back to UK. This is a big one. I mean, warheads are going to be housed at RAF Lakenheath for the first time in 15 years. So they took them away in 2008, thinking that the Cold War threat has diminished. Now it's back, everyone. So it's pretty frightening. I mean, it says as the threat from Russia increases, and a lot of Russia threat stories say. So either we're in a very perilous situation, or the papers want us to think we are. Both scare me, frankly.
Do you think the papers do, or do you think? I mean, there's certainly one obvious explanation would be that the Ministry of Defence is using this as an opportunity to just, rattle their tin to elevate their own budget.
There's definitely been an element of that, hasn't there? And they're saying we're going to have to conscript people and so on. And we've got another story on that later. But yeah, this is quite worrying. And of course, Russia has said this will be viewed as an escalation and would be met with compensating countermeasures, which is never good.
I mean, I do think America's, the coming century, the great fear is China. Obviously, I don't think Russia is a bigger threat, but obviously Lakenheath is not. That is a Russia.
Is that a big threat? It's Lakenheath.
No, I mean that's putting American nukes and bombers and so on British soil. That is in order to confront a Russian threat, right? There's nothing in between here and Russia.
There's nowhere you would use that. Where are you going to use it? I think. Number one, I think these militarists, and I heard John Bolton speak in person,
right?
And he rues the day that Russia gives up fighting. They want the war with Russia. They love it. They remember it. People of a certain age, like myself, we remember the Cold War.
Hey, listen, I think the world made a lot more sense under the Cold War, and we all had the peace dividend in the 90s, but that's when everything fell apart. If you don't, you need to know who your enemy is. Carl Schmitt. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing about the Russians is people don't know this about the Russians. They are an inch away from total collapse as an empire.
Well, I have this conversation all the time. They're winding down, I think. But
I'm just going to add that the warheads are 3 times the strength of Hiroshima, so they should get the job done. Do you know what I mean? It's 3 times. You didn't even need them to be any stronger, really.
That's still pitifully small. I mean, they have.
Is it?
Hiroshima
were pretty bad.
was like 5,000 that Russia tested in the 50s. Was 5,000 Hiroshimas. Finally, the Daily Mail, Lewis. Very quickly, Lewis.
The Daily Mail.
Who is that redhead on the front of the Telegraph, though? Just tell me who
it's probably a man, Simon. You're going to be in some trouble.
Just a bit blurry. I can't see it.
Okay, fine. I'll find out.
So who is it? Will you find
Daily
out?
Mail.
Maybe
I was trying to look. It was too small rank. I think it's a man.
What have you got, Camilla?
This is the death and unhealth issue. Camilla's smile that says the king's fine, because the king's in the hospital, and he had his prostate operated on because he's probably an alcoholic.
On or out?
On. Right. I don't know. It was taken out. I think they cut a little bit of it to move the thing. The truth is that the royal family is suffering from these diseases because they're probably vegans. They're big drinkers. They're on plant-based diets.
Everyone gets prostate trouble in their 70s.
No, they don't. Not everybody does. They do only because they're on plant-based diets. And if you,
That's it for part 1. Join us shortly for part 2. We'll be looking at judicial reviews, social housing, and Kevin Badnock landing one on Justin Trudeau's snout. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's top stories with me, Simon Evans, with comedians Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. So, Lewis, we will start this section with the familiar phenomenon of a grieving mother unpersuaded by judicial process.
Well, you know what, as a parent, you know, when your kid dies, you get upset about something like this. And this is happening up there in Nottingham, which is basically a crazy guy. And he killed 3 people in a very short thing. And he was sentenced, he struck a plea deal. Yeah. And the parents are upset that he struck a plea deal, which is manslaughter when it should have been, you know, that doesn't sound really like murder, even though it was murder. And he's going to be in jail for a relatively short time, but probably not, because the guy was sectioned many times. I don't think they're going to release him.
No, exactly. I think there's a misunderstanding here that he's got away with it. It's the nature of the restraint. He's going to be put into a secure hospital rather than a prison, but I don't think there's any question that he's going to be using his... I mean, there's some talk about a certain kind of sentence whereby if he gets better, he's transferred to prison, which, to be honest, sounds kind of worse to me in a way.
No, but I've heard there's some loophole whereby if he starts taking his medication again and gets better, he might be able to just be released, mightn't he? Is that not true? Or is it he goes back to prison?
Say if he gets better, then he is transferred to a secure unit. But, I mean, that's just weird. But anyway, I don't think... Sure. I mean, I'm certainly pro-strong sentences for murder and very much against any kind of leniency shown to knife crime, but this isn't just like another kind of drug crime lord killing. This is a guy, he is paranoid schizophrenic.
No, but here's where you're all wrong, because we become these strange philosophers when it comes to insanity and temporary insanity, right? This guy was a psychotic guy, OK, but he killed a lot of people. He planned it, OK, he planned it very carefully, he stockpiled knives and so on. Then he kills them. In the past, he's committed assault and bashed down people's doors and stuff. Yeah. So I didn't think he was going to be normal when I heard he'd killed a lot of people. So he's also psychotic. Why does that get him off? Yeah. People say, oh, he wasn't in his right mind, or it wasn't him. Who was it? I've never understood that.
It's a question of compartmentalising his ability to judge the moral rectitude of his behaviour to planning how to get away with it, isn't it? Or how to commit the crimes.
Right, but I'm not saying they are. To me, it's the same person. It's like, oh, but he's psychotic. Yes, and...
well, there is an
he kills some people.
If you drill down into it philosophically, there's an argument that we're all just a product of our brain chemistry and our background and our upbringing and so on, you know, the determinist kind of idea.
But this guy, the most important factor here is he copped a plea deal, and that's the way these things work.
Courts work, and they don't. It doesn't please parents. Sorry, Nick, do you want to?
No, I just disagree there. But I just never understood this thing about you weren't yourself. It's just a strange philosophical get-out clause.
It's to some extent an arbitrary division. Nick, very interesting story in the Telegraph about who gets to decide what kind of story should be in the Telegraph.
Good point. Yeah, it's 2/3 of public want ban on foreign states owning British newspapers. So a survey of more than 2,000 people found 69% think that overseas governments should be be prevented by law from owning media outlets such as newspapers. And of course, this Sheikh Mansour wants to own. He has this Redbird IMI, and he wants to own 75% funded by this sheikh in the UAE. Vice President
wants to buy the Telegraph.
Wants to buy the Telegraph, and there's quite a lot of funny things here. I mean, one thing is that they're saying that you shouldn't be able to have them in countries that don't have free elections and a free press, and it's Ofcom that are investigating this, which of course, as Lewis will point out, renders our press not free. So that's a kind of strange irony. But in general, it's obviously a bad idea to have people in UAE owning the Telegraph. It's like a football, and then once one person does it, you have to have all of them owned by the Saudis or UAE or something, because you can't afford.
That has been extraordinary.
Can't
what's
compete.
happened to football in this country, isn't it? In the last few years, everyone just seems to be quite comfortable with it. But I can't say that I am, to be absolutely honest. Pretty much every top-flight football club in this country now is owned by sort of major, foreign money and some of it quite dirty money. To be honest.
As in this situation, if you don't like it, you don't watch it.
No.
This is the question: who's going to decide what is an important newspaper that needs the interference of the state to tell them what's the
it's the interference of the state to prevent another state interfering, isn't it?
But it's not interfering, because let's say some horrible country like whatever that is, Abu Dhabi, buys this Telegraph. All we have to do is
No, they can influence the national conversation, though, can't they?
They can, of course they can.
You can't say, I'm not going to read it, but
and the Conservative Party, obviously.
is steered by it.
No, because you have a very old attitude towards this. It's the same attitude that Ofcom has, is we have to generate balance. We can't let the people decide themselves.
But they're not the people, are they? This is the point. If you have foreign states owning, and the Telegraph is historically, I mean, I know these are diminishing legacy media and what have you, but it's still a significant title.
It is.
I'm not saying I'm not definitely on one side of
it's not the free market that Lewis is claiming. It's not the free market.
It is the free market.
Sometimes you have to regulate monopolies. Sometimes you have to regulate countries.
There is no free market in the press. Murdoch has owned most of it for my adult lifetime.
Yeah, well, that's
extraordinarily
that's something else.
And they're getting by it with this strange management structure.
It's not even something else. There's enough for everybody.
No, I was going to say they're getting around it. It's quite important. They're getting around it with this. They're having an extra tier in the proposed chain of ownership. So you have this limited partnership. You have this passive partner. We've all probably had one of those. We can't do anything. So that's how they get. Yeah, that's how they're getting away with it. But it's just all sort of trickery, really. They shouldn't be allowed to do it.
Cloak and mirrors, absolutely. Or is it smoke and mirrors? Cloak and mirrors.
Cloak and daggers, smoke and mirrors. But you could have
smoke and daggers, smoke and vape. Guardian now, Lewis. Apparently we all deserve safe housing, but do we all deserve free housing? That's the question, isn't it?
Well, I tell you what's behind this. This is plans to give UK citizens priority for social housing, would, quote-unquote, increase homelessness.
Yep.
And this is from a letter that 10 or 12 organizations who are all left-wing, they're all association, they're all councils who want to build council houses. They basically what they're saying is we want to have free reign to build as much as we can and give it to whoever we want to have.
Yeah.
And if you live in this country, you shouldn't expect to get something on your own.
Their point is that I think across the whole country, it's still the majority of social housing. Significant, like about 90% of social housing is occupied by, English-born, although they may, of course, be second or third generation immigrants. But in central London, it's a slightly different picture, right? And this is the world's most valuable real estate.
Because I am totally involved in this, and I know exactly what's going on, and I have fought the council from building everywhere and destroying Southwark, is that they want to be able to build wherever they want to build. They want to be able to give it to whoever they want to build it. They don't even care about the people.
Like everybody, they want power. Nick, you must have a strong view about this.
Well, I have strong views on social housing, these strange allocations where we have to have a certain percentage of social housing, everything we build, which I'm not really in favour of. It sounds very Tory. But if we are going to have it, yes.
Every ointment must have a handful of flies.
There you go.
Basically, you can't sell an ointment without flies.
That's worse whenever I said. But if we are going to have it, of course, British people should have priority. Why not? It says here it's prompted anger from some of the government who say it could fuel further support for the populist right. Great.
I'll be honest with you. If you had a handful of silver bullets that would help the nation and in particular municipal organisations to rebalance their budgets, the first and foremost one would be no social housing in Zone 1 or 2 in London.
Yeah.
Get them all out. Make the most. Make people pay for living in the most desirable commuter territory in the entire, most of the Europe, let alone...
I would go a step further.
You can
no
put it
social
easily.
housing. The government should not be in the real estate business.
No, exactly.
They're incompetent landlords.
You can
They're
use
slum
this,
landlords.
No, you can use this
and
to
I
level
live,
up.
And I live in social housing. And it's not bad, but you don't trust...
Technically, it's a hostel.
It's not ideal, but you should use it to level up. You should make people go and live...
No, the government,
what about the actual
creates
meat?
poverty.
But what about the meat of this? Do we agree that UK citizens should have priority? I mean, who else?
In London, yeah. If you're going to have social housing, they absolutely should do,
Yeah.
And Telegraph again now, Nick. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees seems to have a few bad apples.
Yeah, you could say that. So UN employees sacked for alleged involvement in Hamas attack on Israel. So now the UN has basically failed to condemn October 7th to the point, I believe, where the UK voted against that UN ceasefire resolution because we felt that it hadn't adequately made that point. So they've been very much on the Palestine side, I believe. It seems like that to me. And so now there's some grim irony in the fact that their, as you say, Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has had these 12 employees who were found on Telegram chats to be wishing for victory for the Hamas heroes, as they call them, and martyrs. So it's absolutely shocking. Now, to be fair, they have sacked them, but I mean, that's the least you could do, really.
So the suspicion is that the UN is kind of a little bit tilted in that direction, isn't it, on the whole, would you say, Lewis?
It's not that even they're co-opted. It is the UN, whatever it's called, the UNRWA, that is geared entirely, from what I know, for the Palestinian situation, which has been horrible. But it's not like they handle refugees anywhere else. They only do it there.
So they didn't handle refugees from Syria or Iraq?
No, they handle Palestinians who have problems there. And as far as I know, you can go on Twitter and you can tell me whether I'm wrong. But the truth is, here is the truth. The truth is this: that they're a fully owned up organization.
Lewis, the Express now. Kemi Badenoch versus Justin Trudeau. Hard to imagine an encounter better suited to a GB News pay-per-view bout.
Yeah, well, because what's
Team World?
Well, it is the Britain trying to claw back a little bit of trade that they lost with Europe.
And Canada's a major trading partner, right?
It is. They trade like 21. I think they trade like $20 billion pounds a year. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff, and it's mostly cars and cheese and beef. And they're negotiating.
I like buying cheese in Canada. Do you know why? I've been to Montreal, I've been to Vancouver and Toronto. Do you know why?
Why?
Because you can order cheese in pounds and ounces in French, which means we won.
Exactly.
The French forced to adopt in Quebec. They are forced to adopt the imperial scheme.
But that's if you consider those people French.
Well,
a disagreement.
You can close your eyes and fantasize.
It's a disagreement over meat and cheese. Doesn't it sound like an argument with Lewis Schaefer? This is what we disagree about every day.
Well,
but also, isn't it hard
talks.
Last point on this, isn't it hard to trade with communist countries?
Oh, very good question.
That is certainly the angle that she should be pushing. I'm sure these talks will resume at some point, but
no hormones in beef. So I'm with the British on this.
Cool. That's it for part 2. In part 3, we have botched executions. Portland dials back the woke, and the BBC loses the heavenly warrant. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 till 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
And welcome back to Headliners. So Sweet Home Alabama now, Nick. No, not so sweet for convicted killers by the sound of it. In The Guardian.
Indeed. Alabama condemned for nitrogen gas execution. They intended to torture him, is a quote there. So this is Kenneth Eugene Smith. You've probably heard about this. They killed him with nitrogen hypoxia. It took about 22 minutes. He was twitching. It was pretty gruesome. It was called experimental and so on. And you think, this is strange. The Guardian's supporting a white man for once. And it's because he's a murderer. And so they can get back on board. Because it takes them until page 3, the 18th paragraph, to point out that he did actually murder a woman in 1988. So, you know, it's this very sympathetic portrait, but let's just all keep that in mind. But
I will say, though, of people who are killed and put onto death row in America, I mean, obviously they spend an awful long time on death row anyway, and it seems to me a very sort of inefficient system, and I'm not quite sure they have the confidence of it. But they're usually like mass killers, horrific killers. This guy's a paid assassin.
Yeah.
He was paid a small amount of money by a judge or something to kill his
No, he was paid $1,000 allegedly to kill this guy's wife.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a strange one. My problem with it is this. The jury voted 11-1 to give him life, not to give him death. But it was overruled. It's called judicial override. It doesn't happen anymore. Overrided by a judge.
Yeah.
Or overridden, whatever the word is. So that I don't like that, because I think the jury should decide.
Yeah.
In general, I'm pro-death penalty because I defer to the wisdom of the British people in this country who want the death penalty for child murder, serial murder, terrorist murder. However, it wasn't that.
No,
so.
exactly. It's a huge conversation, the death penalty conversation. But I mean, I grant them the right to have that in their legislature. What do you think, Lewis? Should they have introduced an experimental method? It hardly seems necessary, does it?
Well, I think they need to maybe take public votes on whether they should kill people, because I mean, I'm against state murder, believe it or not. You know, I mean, I do think people should be put to death. I am, you know me, I'm Mr. Kill, Kill, Kill. But I think...
But not by the state, by you.
Not by the state. But I think if you're going to kill somebody, the state of Alabama should have a vote. Maybe it has to be 66%.
Well, all I think is, if you're going to kill people, there are tried and tested and well-proven methods. I don't understand what the motivation was to introduce
it's
an experimental
24 minutes of torturing the guy. Big deal.
They find it hard to get some of the ingredients, I think, and some of the supplies or something to do it other way. So they also tried to do a lethal injection in November 22.
Yeah.
Right.
But it didn't work because they couldn't find a vein.
You know
so
what works? Guillotine. Guillotine is the single most effective way of doing it.
You know what works?
What about a good old-fashioned hanging?
Hanging is pretty good.
Pushing Billy Joe off the Tallahatchie Bridge.
That was a bag.
Yeah.
Read the lyrics.
Guillotine's a bit French, is my only problem.
Staying stateside, Lewis, and encouraging developments from the West Coast, home of woke. This is Portland. Oregon.
Yes, amazing, really. It's Oregon County officials dismantle a $1 million a year diversity office and now say they want to focus on merit and not to radicalize the workplace. And this is in Oregon, which is pronounced Oregon, not Oregon.
Yeah.
And I've been there. It's a fantastic state. And this is Clackamas County. And they've decided in this county, which is right next to Portland, You know, it's.
I don't know how quickly things change there. I went down the West Coast once, 20 years ago, and Oregon inland a little bit. It's like the huge forest, right? They used to do logging there, and you can go to these bars and they have photographs on the wall with people sitting on vast stumps and stuff, quite masculine and old-fashioned.
Yeah.
And yet Portland itself, I don't know whether it is like an enclave, is like more woke than San Francisco or any of them, isn't it? It's like the most.
Well, they used to say this. They used to, when I was there, they used to say, "Don't Californicate Oregon," because they didn't like it, and eventually it did. All those people moved up from Portland. Oregon is an amazing state, as all America. It's so much better than England.
Yeah, I've actually been to Portland to a comedy festival of all things. But yeah, it's amazing this would happen in Oregon. You think because it's so woke, but this is where DEI is in trouble, and I wrote a piece about this the other day. It's in trouble because you had Price Waterhouse Cooper, and they had to rewrite one of their internships, which hadn't allowed white people, basically. They had to change that. You have Bill Ackman, who's a lefty, but he's now so against DEI, he calls it inherently racist and illegal, and he's funding Dean Phillips, the Democrat candidate. He's given him $1 million, and mysteriously, all mention of DEI has disappeared from Phillips's website at the same time. So you now see on the left, they are even tiring of it. Elon Musk, of course, is against it. Mark Cuban defended it, but got completely spanked by Musk on X, because Musk said to him, well, when can we see a short Asian woman in the Dallas Mavericks? Because it's an absurd proposition, the whole thing. And now people and it's costly. This costs them $1 million a year.
Yeah.
So they're finally getting rid of it.
Ackman was radicalised by the Claudine Gay story, I think, wasn't it, at Harvard? And he's a big funder of the Ivy League universities. I think they went after his wife or something as well. I don't know exactly what the sequence of events was.
She was accused of cheating, just like Claudine Gay.
Plagiarism.
But what makes this story the most interesting thing is the guy who was leading the charge in Clackamas County is a guy named Ben West, and he's a Republican, but he's a gay nurse, married to a man, and he has a black child.
There's nothing that doesn't surprise me in the least. Well, any of the most powerful and influential Republicans, Peter Thiel, right?
He's an Oregon Republican, you know what I mean?
As they say in Yellowstone. Anyway, Telegraph now, Nick, it seems there is no mention of the BBC in the Old Testament, after all.
No, BBC has no God-given right to exist, says Tory chairman Richard Holden, and he was interviewed about it, and he says, I think there is a broad liberal establishment element to the BBC, that skews the way they look at some things and so on, all very straightforward stuff, and he says it needs to understand the country that it's there to serve, all the kind of stuff we all know about the BBC. This strange thing that they could be, and there's also great people behind the scenes, great people, but for some reason there's this ridiculous liberal bias they can't get rid of, and it's just destroying them.
It's interesting how a lot of people feel it in their bones, as Stephen Fry would say, about Brexit being, we feel it in our bones. But there was a guy, I can't remember his name, the Tory minister who was talking to Kay Burley on Sky, and he said, the BBC News is terribly biased. And she said, give me an example. He said, well, I listened to the news quiz last night, and it was, there was this tirade of abuse against the Conservatives. Well, that's a topical...
Against Simon Evans.
There is a bias, I think, on Radio 4 comedy, but that isn't enough for them to complain. They've got to actually they've got to nail down some examples.
I had a ton the other day. You've got the Brexit coverage, you've got the lockdown coverage, you've got the woman laughing about Boris Johnson going, you've got Emily Maitlis's monologue / entire career.
He could have, Merrihew or something his name was, I can't remember, but he was completely unable to give a plausible example.
It happened the other day to Lucy Fraser, I think. They need to
even if there are no examples, there's no place for a state broadcaster in a world where there's lots of different outlets.
Would you say it was too centralised?
I would say it is centralised. And here's Lucy Fraser, who I met, a lovely woman, and she says there's not sufficient impartiality. Screw impartiality. It misses the point. The point is they're owned by the state, or they're a tool of the state. It takes our money against our will. It's theft.
Well, that's the whole of tax. I personally think it's
that's
been a
what
pretty
tax
good thing
is.
On the whole, the BBC over the course of its lifetime. But it is in, like a lot of these institutions, it is doing exactly what its enemies would hope it would do in order to continue the argument for its abolition.
And just quickly for Lewis, because I know he's American, that the impartiality is tied to the fact that we were expected to pay the licence fee. That's what makes it their responsibility to represent us, because they're extracting the licence fee. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter about impartiality.
That's when they had one TV channel. And now there's 1 million TV channels, there's 1 million sources of news.
And nothing on.
Yeah.
Very interesting. encouraging news about bowel cancer now in the Sun, Lewis. Nick is going to sit this one out, but I want to hear your views.
Well, it's this is a lie. This is in the Sun, and the Sun is owned by News Corp, and News Corp owns the Times, and these people they love drugs, and it's not even a vaccine. It's
a minute ago you thought that News Corp was the answer and the BBC was the problem.
I would rather have a News Corp than the state-owned propaganda network. Okay. Yes, I would.
But essentially, you'd just like to know the truth automatically without having to refer to it.
No, I would like to have an open debate. But here, this is game-changing bowel cancer vaccine could be available in the NHS in just 2 years. But this is not a vaccine because this is something that they give to patients before surgery, so they have bowel cancer.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're already sick.
So it's not like a vaccine you take as a child.
No, it's very similar to that bogus vaccine they gave people for COVID-19.
They do use the word vaccine now as a kind of catch-all for anything that's injected, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is a bit odd. I know what you mean, yeah. It's not how it's supposed to be.
It is a bit
A vaccine
odd.
is a very particular mechanism whereby you stimulate production of antibodies with a...
Yeah.
Just because you've said, I'll sit this one out, I have to address it. People think I'm dying if you just leave it at that. I only just don't look at these because my extreme health anxiety. And the producers put them in to hurt me because they know I don't like
it. I can look at this say you don't need to worry about bowel cancer, just have an all-meat diet and you'll be fine.
Yes, that is. I believe that completely. And not only that, like, let's say you do get cancer, anybody out there with cancer, Thomas Seyfried, Seyfried.
Okay,
it says,
I have no knowledge about that. We have.
Well, you can look it up.
By all means, look it up. But I'm
Thomas
not going to let you go any
Seyfried.
further with that.
Thomas Seyfried.
Quackery. Interesting scenarios being laid out by former British NATO commander in the Mail, Nick. This is interesting to those of us in our 50s, at least.
Yeah, this is former British NATO commander calls for nation to start thinking the unthinkable and reconsider conscription after Army Chief says Brits should be equipped to fight in a war against Russia. So, of course, we saw General Sir Patrick Sanders say that the other day. Now he's added to this saying, well, maybe we could have mandatory national service, which is quite different from... There's two scenarios. One is you think national service so that 18-year-olds stop being so slovenly, we all go fine. Yeah. Conscripting me into a war, you're like, hang on, that's a different thing.
There were always two answers, criteria, like benefits, I suppose, for national service. And the one for most of my lifetime has been exactly what you say. Layabouts get, brushed up and ship-shape and shouted at, and they learn to sit up straight and set an alarm clock and so on. But the other one is that you have kind of pre-battle hardened individuals ready so that if there is a sudden outbreak of war, conscription doesn't go from 0 to 60 in like 2 weeks. You've already been drilled. It's kind of familiar when you get called up again, right?
Those are good reasons, but the reason they're giving is totally wrong. Russia is not a threat to this country. Russia is on the way out. They've had demographic collapse.
Well, everywhere's got that.
Okay, everybody's got that, but they do. They've lost all these troops in the Ukraine, which they're having trouble actually defending, but they've got a million other borders, Finland, in the north, Caucasus in the south.
There's certainly no threat to our territory. I suppose it's the NATO proposition, isn't it? But I personally tend to agree with you.
But what interests me about this, and you may have covered it before on the show, is the fact that no one wants to sign up for the army, even in theory, because the left doesn't want to because they're like, well, we don't like the country, we're citizens of Europe or we're recent immigrants, whatever it is. And the right doesn't want to because because
it's been captured by the left.
Yeah, the whole country's captured by the left, mass immigration and so on, and all that kind of stuff. And RAF won't take white men. There was this thing leaked, I'm sure you saw it, from 2017, where it was like we're looking out for extreme indicators of extreme right wing. It was from the army. Some of them were patriotism, was one of them, putting Istan after town names, and one of them was making inaccurate generalizations about the left or government. So if you said the left or the government are good, that would be an inaccurate generalization. You wouldn't be fit for the army. It's insane.
Have any kind of remotely right-wing political point.
That's the people that would have gone into the army, the patriots.
Absolutely. That's it for part 3. In the final section, we have wacko Russian scientists, wacko British boffins, and the absolute core science of immortality. Stick around. This is when it gets fancy in a couple of minutes.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. We have the Mirror now, Lewis. Shocking news of religious persecution in Mother Russia.
Could be religious persecution. Top Russian scientists fired after claiming human beings can live for up to 900 years. And this is a guy who was head of the General Genetics Institute of the Russian Academy of Science. He was a big shot, and he said that people used to live to 900 years, and they don't live now that long. And I think a lot of this, and there's also, they said that anybody who died, the reason they died was because God was punishing them for sin. So it's a bit wacky.
That's not wacky. That used to be everyone's view.
It's in the Old Testament. There are people who live that long. I don't know if he's a Jew or if it's an Orthodox Russian thing, but the Old Testament is full of, and that is the story. And as he says, 7 generations the sins are visited upon the children of
well, think about it as well. Methuselah.
But they didn't mention mutations.
Methuselah was 969, famously. Noah was 950. Adam was 930. Then everything went wrong. You know, you had the garden, you had Cain, then you had the era of the Nephilim, increasing corruption on the earth, which led God to flood everything. So that's what he's talking about, the fall into decay because of the sins of people. This is just, everyone used to think this. Now it's presented as wacky.
But I suppose the thing is he sort of, does he privately, like, cherish these beliefs and keep some old leather-bound editions of the Bible on his shelf to consult in times of private, difficulty? Or is he weaving them into the text as he gives a PowerPoint presentation at the International Genetics Association?
Well, he says it's his personal view. He says he in no way is the position of the Church or the Academy of Sciences.
Because it's a bit like Rees-Mogg, isn't it? Who, some people felt was his Catholic views were at odds with liberal democracy, but he never let them interfere with his actual voting in House of Commons and so on.
Yeah, that's true. He's basically saying sin gets in the genes. So if you want a healthy offspring, don't develop bad habits, don't fall into sin. I mean, it's good advice either way. But can I just say, also, in a serious scientific thing as well, Aubrey de Grey has said that the first person born has already been born who'll live to 1,000. So there are serious scientists saying that.
I think that, there is it's not exactly mainstream, but there is certainly the possibility that we may be to some extent degraded. Of course, Lewis will say that if you get onto the all-meat diet...
Eat meat.
enough.
What's that thing? Terminal escape velocity? Is that the right term? Where
There are two different velocities. Escape velocity is the one you need to get away from the gravitational pull of the Earth, and terminal velocity is the highest speed.
What's the one I mean then? What's the one that means that we're solving aging quicker than? We're outpacing the rate of... Have you not heard that one?
So you'll never die, yeah.
We'll never die because we're increasing our life expectancy each year faster than it's getting us. I can't remember the name of it. It's something terminal something... I've got the name slightly wrong. Someone will be tweeting angrily at me right now, but it exists.
Yeah, OK. Well, hopefully we will get that.
Can I say...
Yeah.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Really?
I think it is possible. 900 years. It is possible. First of all, we don't know how many revolutions the Earth spin around the sun. We don't know how many days, how fast the Earth was moving. So we don't know what a year is.
Oh, you think possibly people live for 900 years because the Earth was going around that much quicker?
Yeah, and a lot of times people lied about their ages because they wanted to get out. Get out of the draft, or they were on TV and they wanted people to like them, so they said they were much older than they were, instead of people thinking that I look horrible.
Longevity escape velocity.
OK, that's interesting. We'll look into that. Staying with dubious pseudoscience, though, Nick, and apparently some people have rich-looking faces. Clean, for a start, I guess.
Yeah, but probably no one here, sadly. Well, certainly not me. Do you have a resting rich face? People with narrow, friendly faces are seen as wealthier than those with wider faces. I'm looking at Lewis. Looks pretty wide, not that friendly. But yeah, this comes from the University of Glasgow. They've never seen a rich person, I mean. But it's apparently, I don't know, it's the usual sort of physiognomy is real meme from the internet. It's like, I don't know. Some of the, rich faces more defined with protruding noses, upturned mouths, huge, high foreheads. Mine's all right. I mean, maybe I'm all right, but yeah, it's basically some people look rich, therefore you trust them and you think they're better.
When you cast for a film or a play, you certainly bear that in mind, don't you? I remember there was some controversy a little while back. The Crown, the TV series, and they recast the Queen. I can't remember, she's that Olivia Colman, who's in everything, and a chap called Charles. What's his name? Is it not Charles Spencer? I can't remember his name. Who ex-editor of the Telegraph, writes for the Spectator. He said she had a socialist face. He said she wasn't a plausible actress for the Queen because she just looked like she'd be left-wing. And there was a real serious uproar about that. But I felt there was a little bit of truth.
Well, there is truth. And proof positive is that I've been in 6 episodes of The Crown. Okay, number one. Number two, fat people look poorer because they
do now.
Can I just say, on a serious note, I loved you as Butler number 3. That was brilliant work.
I played
just your hands. Amazing.
I played the Canadian Prime Minister.
We're going to squeeze in one more story, I think, before the break, before the end of the show, rather. Telegraph, Lewis. This looks dangerously close to Lifestyle Filler, but it's obviously in the same vein. Go on.
This could be about me. 7 rules for slowing down after 60 and why you shouldn't take it too easy. And this is a Telegraph, and this woman, poor woman, she's got an older husband who's lost it, and I think, or boyfriend.
He's tired of her, isn't he?
He's tired of her. He's tired of life. She's run him down.
She's always go. But there's advice in there. Do you think any of it's any good?
No. It says get fit and exercise is 2 of the 6 things. And the truth is that exercise is really debilitating. I know it exhausts you.
You burn off your gains, don't you?
Whether you burn,
you get the endorphins and you feel better about working with Lewis Schaefer.
The number one thing you can do.
The show has run out of time, Lewis.
Eat red meat.
Oh, what a shocker!
The show is nearly over.
This has been my worst show. I think.
Let's take another quick look at Saturday's front pages. We have the Times, Nottingham mother calling for an inquiry into killings. The Telegraph, US to move nuclear weapons back to the United Kingdom's mystery redhead still unidentified. The Guardian, Israel ordered by court to prevent genocide in Gaza. The Express, King chose Kate's Hospital to save taxpayers' money. Thoughtful. The iNews, UK's golden age with China harmed British intelligence, says former MI6 spy chief. Too late now. The Daily Mail, Camilla's smile that says the King's fine and his prostate is bouncing back to life. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thanks to my guests, Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. Josh Howie will be in the hot seat tomorrow with Lewis and Jonathan Cogan. It'll be a storming show. If you're watching at 5 a.m, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. There will be a lot of dry weather this weekend. Some rain in the far northwest at first, before it turns wetter across Scotland and Northern Ireland by Sunday afternoon, and increasingly windy. But essentially, high pressure sits to the south, low pressure way to the north over Iceland, in between quite a tight pressure gradient, and as a result we're going to see a blustery end to Friday across the north and northwest of the UK, particularly northwest Scotland, where there'll continue to be showers or longer spells of rain. 1 or 2 spots of rain for Northern Ireland, Northern England, but with the cloud and the breeze here it will be frost free. Meanwhile, in the south and southeast, well, it will be a chilly start to the day. A few mist patches here and there, nothing too extensive. Otherwise, plenty of sunshine and temperatures rising through the morning as a result. A perfectly fine day on Saturday for many parts of the UK. Increasingly breezy to the north and the west, and some very wet and windy weather for the far north of Scotland later on for the west of Scotland. Feeling cold here, but elsewhere 9-10 Celsius, perfectly mild for the time of year. Into Sunday morning, a lot more cloud, more of a breeze as well, so generally frost-free away from some sheltered parts of the far southeast. And we keep largely cloudy skies into the afternoon, although some glimmers of brightness will lead to some remarkably mild air across Wales and northern England. Increasingly wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Similar conditions on Monday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers